Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a stack of sources articles, some pretty heavy research technical notes, and we're going to boil them down to the essential, fascinating algorithms that secretly, run our lives.
That's right.
We are diving into this really surprising relationship you probably didn't know you had.
Mm-hmm.
The one between your, anxiety-ridden daily decisions
Mm-hmm.
and computer science.
It sounds like a stretch, but it's not. We are basically treating life as a computational problem.
Okay.
Our sources explore these fundamental constraints of being human, finite time, finite space, information overload, that crippling uncertainty, and they don't treat them as unique psychological failings.
Right. Not like there's something wrong with us.
No, not at all. They're just challenges that, computer scientists have already tackled and, in many cases, solved with some really elegant mathematical proofs.
And the core thesis of this deep dive, it's so wonderfully counterintuitive.
It really is.
We often look at our own behavior procrastination, overthinking, snap decisions, the mess we tolerate, and we label it. We call it irrational or inefficient.
We beat ourselves up for it.
Exactly. But what if we're wrong? What if many of those agonizing, seemingly impulsive choices are actually the proven, optimal solutions to really complex computational problems?
And we're going to unpack some core concepts, things like optimal stopping, exploration, even network flow protocols, to reveal the wisdom that's kind of baked into your internal operating system.
So you'll see exactly why the balance between, say, impulsivity and that paralyzing analysis often lands on this strange, precise number,
37%.
37%, and how your perpetually messy pile of papers isn't a failure of organization.
But an example of a mathematically near-optimal filing system.
Get ready to look at every choice you make, from finding the perfect parking spot to managing your career through the lens of an algorithm that surprisingly knows exactly what it's doing.
Let's get into it.
Okay, let's start with the inescapable agony of selection. This is such a universal human problem.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether you're trying to find the best apartment, trying to get the perfect parking space, or, looking for a long-term partner, we constantly feel like we're caught in this loop, asking ourselves, when do I stop looking?
You've just perfectly captured the dilemma. Mathematically, all these scenarios, they fall under the umbrella of the optimal stopping problem.
Optimal stopping.
And the anguish, it comes from a specific catch-22. The goal isn't just which option to pick, it's figuring out how many options you should even consider before you commit.
And the constraint, the thing that makes it so high stakes, is that acquiring the data seeing another apartment costs you the option itself.
Exactly.
If I pass up a great apartment today to see what else is out there, that first apartment is probably gone tomorrow.
The data acquisition is destructive to the opportunity. You're operating sequentially in real time, and every commitment is irreversible.
Okay, so the classic illustration of this is the secretary problem. It goes by a lot of names. The apartment hunter's dilemma, the bachelor's dilemma. Can you walk us through the setup?
The setup is really stringent. Imagine you have a fixed number of applicants, let's say 100, and you have to interview them one by one in a random order.
Okay.
You have two non-negotiable rules. First, you can only judge an applicant based on their relative rank. You can tell that applicant number 10 is better than the first 9.
But you can't give them a score, like an 8 out of 10.
No cardinal scores. And second, if you pass on an applicant, they are gone permanently. And your goal is to maximize your chance of choosing the absolute single best person in that whole pool of 100.
That sounds completely impossible.
It feels like it.
If I choose too soon, I miss out on potentially better people. If I wait too long, I might already passed over the best one.
Yeah.
It's decision paralysis turned into a mathematical torture device.
It is, but the solution, which comes out of dynamic programming and probability theory, is stunningly precise. It's called the 37% rule.
The 37% rule.
If you have n options, you have to observe or reject the first n divided by e of the pool. Now, e, the base of the natural logarithm, is about 2.718, so that works out to roughly 37%.
So wait, if I'm looking at 100 apartments, I have to look at the first 37 and consciously choose none of them, even if one seems absolutely perfect.
That's the rule. You have to use that initial 37% as your essential benchmark. It is your calibration phase.
And then what?
Immediately after passing that 37% threshold, you're ready to leap for the very first subsequent option that is better than every single one you saw in that initial sample.
And if you do that, what's the result?
This is the amazing part, the mathematical symmetry. Following the strategy gives you approximately a 37% chance of succeeding.
Oh.
meaning a 37% chance of selecting the single best option out of the entire pool. It's the optimal strategy. It strikes the perfect balance between getting enough data to set a high standard, that's the exploration part, and being ready to commit, which is exploitation.
It's just fascinating how this problem shows up in real life across centuries.
Hmm.
It was about women choosing suitors in the 19th century,
Right.
and then it was standardized in the mid-20th century as the secretary problem, with male bosses choosing female assistants.
Hmm.
The context changes, but the algorithm is fixed.
And we have a perfect historical example of this in Johannes Kepler, the astronomer. After his first wife died in 1611, he undertook what he called an arduous quest to remarry. He courted 11 women,
11.
and he recorded his agony in meticulous detail. He judged the fourth woman to be the best he had seen so far. He wrote that he liked her because of her tall build and athletic body.
But he didn't pick her.
No, he kept searching, and he eventually settled on the fifth. And he lamented the restlessness and doubtfulness that pushed him past that fourth one.
He was experiencing the exact tension of the optimal stopping problem.
He was, but his analysis might have been a bit flawed. In a strict secretary problem, once you pass option 4, she's gone forever.
But in real life,
But in real-life courtship, second chances are often possible, right? Even if they're improbable. The agony Kepler felt, that doubtfulness, might actually reflect the optimal strategy when data acquisition is costly, but not completely destructive.
so if you can potentially go back, the 37% rule gets more complicated.
It does, but that underlying drive to keep searching for a brief period, that remains rational.
Let's apply this to something where the commitment is almost immediate, like finding a parking spot. We're all driving around, burning gas, sacrificing time, looking for that ideal spot right near the store entrance.
Oh, this is a beautiful application. It's been heavily studied by an economist, Donald Shoup. He argues that the optimal stopping problem for parking is, well, it's a game theoretic problem wrapped in an economic one.
So what determines when you stop searching?
Instinctively, it's when the cost of continuing to search wasted time, frustration outweighs the benefit you expect from finding a better spot.
That makes sense.
And Shoup models the computational crux around something called the occupancy rate. When parking is too cheap, or free, the occupancy rate goes way up.
Okay.
If it jumps from, say, 90% to 95%, the incentive to circle for a spot close to the door becomes enormous. Why? Because the cost of parking far away is zero, and the cost of circling is just gas and time.
So all the drivers are trying to optimize for themselves.
Right, and they end up wasting huge amounts of time, what Shoup calls cruising, because they're all constantly trying to solve this really difficult, optimal stopping problem in traffic.
So if I'm circling for 10 minutes, I've decided that the benefit of saving a 30-second walk is worth 10 minutes of my life.
Which is a terrible trade-off.
A truly terrible trade-off.
And the optimal algorithmic solution, according to Shoup, isn't to tell drivers how to park. It's to fix the computational problem they're facing. Raise the price of parking just slightly until the occupancy rate drops to around 85%. At 85% occupancy, drivers can find a space quickly without all that cruising. The problem becomes simple. Take the first empty spot you see. You replace a complex search problem with a simple check.
And you mentioned you'd call that computational kindness in design.
Exactly. You make the problem easier for everyone to solve.
So the optimal stopping problem deals with a fixed sequence. But most of life is this open-ended series of choices, right? Do I stick with my favorite routine, or do I try something new?
And that is the core of the explore-exploit trade-off.
The explore-exploit trade-off.
This trade-off is central to maximizing your, let's call it, total winnings in life. Exploration is expensive. It's gathering new, unknown information, trying that new Thai place downtown, or reading a new author.
And exploitation is efficient.
Right. It's using the information you already have to guarantee a known good result. Going to your favorite Italian place, rereading a beloved book.
And we associate exploitation with life's greatest comforts. The band playing its greatest hits, family gatherings. It's comforting because the risk is basically zero.
Mm-hmm. And the tension itself is perfectly embodied in what's called the multi-armed bandit problem.
Okay.
Imagine you're in front of a row of slot machines bandits, and each one has an unknown but fixed probability of paying out. You have a finite number of pulls. Do you keep pulling the one that's paid out well, recently exploit, or do you try the untested ones, hoping for a hidden jackpot explore?
That choice seems impossible without knowing the odds.
It is impossible unless you define the most crucial factor, the length of your interval.
How long you'll be in the casino.
Exactly. How many total pulls do you have? This is the difference between carpe diem, seizing the day, a short interval, and carpe vitam, seizing a lifetime, a long one. The optimal balance hinges entirely on that time horizon.
Which has really profound implications for how we view different stages of life.
Absolutely. When the interval is long, when you're young, exploration is highly rational. Trying new, random, maybe slightly less satisfying things is a wise investment.
Why?
Because the payoff from discovering a lifelong passion or a perfect career or a perfect partner, that payoff will be enjoyed for decades. The discovery is worth the initial cost.
But as the interval shortens,
As the interval shortens later in life, the rational move shifts toward pure exploitation. And studies consistently show this. Older adults report higher satisfaction and emotional well-being.
and it's not because they're less capable of adapting.
No, it's because they rationally shift their attention. They hone their social networks down to the most meaningful relationships. They prioritize deep connection over casting a wide net. They revisit their favorite places, music, routines.
I love that perspective. It reframes what we call getting set in their ways.
No.
Not as cognitive rigidity,
No.
but as a sophisticated algorithmic strategy honed over a lifetime. They're leveraging this massive database of past experiences to maximize their current pleasure.
Yeah, that's it exactly. Older brains are managing a much greater store of memories. They're solving literally harder computational problems every day, navigating a bigger database. When your grandmother tells you which bakeries are excellent, she's exploiting decades of exploration.
We can see this hyper-exploitation play out in industries that think they have short intervals, too.
Yeah.
Hollywood is a perfect, if somewhat tragic, example.
Oh, yes.
Our sources note this deluge of sequels. The shift from, 2 out of 10 top-grossing films being sequels in 1981 to 8 out of 10 in 2011.
This is a classic short-termist, exploit-focused phase. A sequel, a reboot, a film based on some pre-existing IP, that's the equivalent of pulling the arm of the highest-paying bandit you already know.
The studio is minimizing risk,
And maximizing immediate, known cash cows.
which seems like a perfectly rational response if the industry believes its interval, its time horizon, is shrinking.
It does, and the economics back that up. The profits for the largest film studios declined by 40% between 2007 and 2011. So when you're facing a shrinking revenue stream, the optimal strategy is to stop searching for the next great original idea, which is a huge exploration risk, and instead maximize immediate returns from what you already have. It's a sad form of rational resource allocation.
Okay, so this explore-exploit tension, it becomes ethically urgent, life or death in clinical trials.
It really does.
The standard clinical trial design, A/B testing, where patients are randomly split and kept on their assigned treatment, that prioritizes resolving which treatment is better for future patients.
That's the key distinction. Traditional trials are exploration-heavy. They maximize information gain for posterity. But this means that if one treatment starts showing clear superiority, patients in the trial often have to stay on the inferior treatment.
For months, sometimes.
For months to maintain statistical rigor.
And the Belmont Report, which is the bedrock of ethical research, it acknowledges this fundamental conflict. To avoid harm, you need to learn what is harmful, and that learning process itself involves risk.
Exactly. So biostatisticians have argued that the standard approach is often suboptimal and, potentially cruel to the current patients. They proposed adaptive trials.
Treating the study not as an informational exercise.
But as a multi-armed bandit problem that has to be solved in real time.
This led to the randomized play the winner algorithm. How does that work?
It's a variant of a strategy called win-stay, lose-shift. Instead of keeping the split 50-50, every time a treatment results in a win, a positive outcome, you increase the probability that the next patient entering the trial gets assigned that successful treatment.
And a loss favors the alternative, so the trial itself is dynamic.
It's self-correcting.
The famous example is the 1980s ECMO study for respiratory failure in infants.
Yeah.
This was a really audacious experimental treatment at the time.
Yes. That study used the play-the-winner algorithm. As ECMO began showing significantly better results than conventional therapy, the algorithm diverted more and more infants toward the successful experimental treatment while the study was still running.
And they stopped the trial early, right?
They did, because the results became so overwhelmingly clear.
I remember this was controversial, though.
Yeah.
Because the statistical power of the final result, the definitive answer, was slightly weaker because there were so few patients left in the conventional group.
And that's the explore-exploit cost. They sacrificed a small degree of definitive future knowledge, pure exploration, to achieve a massive increase in computational kindness and positive outcomes for the patients currently in the trial. That's the exploitation part.
It's a choice.
It's a choice that reveals a preference for optimizing the current interval, the lives of those infants. Today, over-optimizing for informational completeness for studies decades down the line.
We've moved from selection to efficiency. The challenge now is organization. How do we impose order on the chaos of tasks, papers, information that's just constantly bombarding us?
It's essential to remember that computer science itself, in many ways, was born from this urgent human need to organize.
Right.
Sorting is the fundamental act of imposing order. Think about the U.S. Census. The tabulation of the 1880 census took an agonizing 8 years.
8 years.
It barely finished before the 1890 census was about to start. This data backlog, this sorting crisis, spurred Herman Hollerith to invent his punched card machine, the ancestor of IBM. That machine could count and sort data automatically, and it basically saved the U.S. government from total organizational collapse.
And sorting wasn't just foundational, it was ubiquitous. By the 1960s, a quarter of the world's computing resources, the cumulative power of all those early mainframes, was spent entirely on sorting.
And this cost helps us understand the trade-offs we make in organization. When we talk about the complexity of sorting, we use notation like O of n squared and O of n log n.
Okay, those sound like pure jargon to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Can you demystify what O of n squared means in human terms?
Absolutely. O of n squared is quadratic time. Think of organizing a bookshelf using a simple method like insertion sort. You pick up a book and move it past roughly half the other books to find its correct place. If you have n items, the time it takes increases by n multiplied by n. If sorting one shelf takes 5 minutes, sorting 5 identical shelves takes 5 times 25 times as long, over 2 hours. That squared term is why the chaos feels computationally overwhelming as your organization grows.
That explains why the mess seems to breed exponentially.
Precisely. Now, efficient algorithms like merge sort, they run in linear rhythmic time, or O of n log n. That log n factor, the logarithm, is the crucial barrier breaker. It means that as n gets huge, the time increase slows down dramatically.
And that's the best you can do.
O of n log n is the fundamental limit for any comparison-based sorting method. You simply cannot achieve a full rank ordering with fewer comparisons.
And yet, sometimes we choose less efficient methods because of a non-computational goal. Sports, for example.
A perfect divergence. If your only goal is to find the champion, you use a linear time algorithm, O of n.
Like March Madness.
Exactly. Single elimination tournaments like March Madness require exactly n-1 games to crown a winner, because every game eliminates one team. That's blindingly fast. But you sacrifice a full rank ordering. You only know who got first place.
And Michael Trick, the famous sports scheduler, notes that professional leagues, like Major League Baseball, they run a full round robin. That's O of n squared.
Even though O of n log n is enough for a full rank.
Why?
They choose the quadratic algorithm because the games themselves are the point. The maximum number of comparisons is inefficient from a data perspective, but it's essential from an entertainment and revenue perspective. The human purpose overrides the computational efficiency.
This also informs how social hierarchies emerge too, right?
Yes. Dominance hierarchies, whether in macaque groups or hen pecking orders, are information hierarchies that often emerge through O of n squared pairwise fights.
So more fights as the group gets bigger.
Sorting theories suggest that the number of aggressive acts per individual grows at least logarithmically, if not quadratically, as group size increases. The only way to minimize conflict is if every individual has a detailed and similar understanding of the rank order. If that information breaks down, the computational burden, the number of fights needed to reestablish the hierarchy spikes.
So the immense societal leap was moving from that ordinal system ranking via violence to a cardinal system, where we use objective, absolute scores like test results or bank balances.
And that dramatically reduced the computational burden and the necessary conflict required to maintain social order. The rat race might be exhausting, but at least it's a race, not a continuous fight.
Okay, the next great organizational challenge is the memory wall, the delay we experience when we're trying to retrieve information from storage.
Right.
As Sherlock Holmes wisely put it, the goal is not to have useless facts elbowing out the useful ones.
Holmes was describing the principle of caching. Our brains, like computers, use a hierarchy of memory storage. You have a fast, small L1 cache, slower, larger RAM, and then huge, slow disk storage.
And caching is about keeping what you need in the fastest layer.
Exactly. But when that fast cache gets full, you need an eviction policy. Which item do you throw out?
And the optimal policy, proven by Laszlo Bialotti in 1966, is to keep the item you will need again longest from now.
which requires clairvoyance, a luxury that is unavailable to both computers and humans.
So since we can't predict the future, we look to the past.
We do. And the overwhelming favorite policy is least recently used, or LRU.
LRU works because of temporal locality, the powerful idea that if you access something recently, you'll probably need it again soon.
The past, mirrored backward, is the best guide to the near future.
And this principle is everywhere.
It is. You see Berkeley libraries use LRU. They evict books that have been unused for 12 years to remote storage. Amazon's fulfillment centers, famous for storing items chaotically.
A pencil sharpener next to a bag of diapers.
Right. They use LRU to manage their process. They stage high-demand items in a quickly accessible cache area. They even have a patent for anticipatory package shipping, predicting regional demand based on recent popularity spikes.
Now let's talk about the messy desk, because this is the most counterintuitive application of all. The Japanese economist Yukio Noguchi advises against grouping files by content.
Which is the cornerstone of standard organization.
Like with like.
Noguchi realized that organization by content is incredibly computationally costly. You spend too much time sorting, filing, and then searching for the right folder. His system, where the most recently used file is simply placed at the front, is a perfect real-world instance of the move-to-front algorithm, which is LRU-based.
But what about the mess? The towering, precarious pile of papers.
This is where the mathematical proof comes in from Daniel Sleeter and Robert Turgeon. They prove that if you simply toss items back on top of the pile after you use them, creating that self-organizing mess, that system is nearly optimal.
Nearly up.
Crucially, your search time in that mess will never be more than twice the time you would have spent searching if you were clairvoyant and knew exactly where the item was going to be next.
Wait, searching a disorganized pile is only twice as slow as knowing the future.
That's a stunning result. The algorithm operating in your chaotic pile, the simple rule of using recency as a proxy for future need, is incredibly effective. What looks like human sloppiness is actually a very smart strategy for managing the computational cost of microorganization
So you're trading off the cost of maintaining perfect order.
against the slightly increased time cost of search. And that's often a very good trade.
And this translates directly to our own minds.
It does. Psychological research suggests our episodic memory functions like an optimal cache. And the common experience of cognitive decline, the senior moment, or a retrieval error, may not reflect a decline in capacity, but the unavoidable cost of managing a massive, well-tuned database.
So older brains are slower, not because they're broken.
But because the computational problem they solve every day is objectively harder, they have vastly more information to navigate.
Moving on to time management, scheduling. If you follow all the gurus, you'd be caught between get things done, do the fast tasks first, and eat that frog, do the hardest task first.
Right.
But the scheduling paradox is fundamental.
Yeah.
If you are a single person and you plan to do all the tasks, the order is irrelevant to the total time spent.
It's a great point. The order only matters when you optimize for specific metrics, like minimizing lateness or maximizing your total return or just shortening that visible to-do list the fastest.
What are the algorithms for those metrics?
Okay, so the earliest due date, or EDD, rule is optimal for minimizing the maximum lateness. Think of serving customers. You want to make sure the person whose cake is due in 5 minutes gets served before the person whose coffee is due in 30.
Makes sense. And the shortest processing time, SPT rule.
SPT is optimal for rapidly shortening the to-do list.
Okay.
You process the shortest tasks first, and we see this applied to financial planning.
The debt snowball.
Exactly. SPT leads to the debt snowball strategy. Pay off the smallest debts first, regardless of interest rate. The metric here is psychological momentum, reducing the quantity of items on the list.
But if you prioritize maximizing your financial return, the algorithm shifts.
Correct. You move to weighted shortest processing time, or WSPT. You divide the reward, the weight or value, by the duration, the time required.
You're calculating an hourly rate for each task.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
And WSPT dictates the debt avalanche strategy. Pay off the highest interest rate debt first, regardless of its size, because that debt carries the highest penalty or negative reward per unit of time. The algorithm is fixed. Your chosen metric dictates the solution.
Now let's introduce the variable of real life. Uncertainty. A constant stream of new emails, phone calls, sudden demands.
The ability to stop a task and switch what's called preemption is the skeleton key that makes many hard scheduling problems manageable.
Preemption.
It means saving the exact state of your current task, so you can drop it, run another task, and then seamlessly return later. The weighted SPT with preemption is the best general-purpose strategy in the face of uncertainty. if a new incoming task has a higher reward-to-time ratio than the one you're currently on.
The math says switch.
Switch immediately.
So if the math says switching is optimal, why do humans find context switching so exhausting and unproductive?
Because the cost of preemption for humans, what we can call meta work, is massive. For a computer, saving and loading the state of a program takes microseconds. For us, it's minutes lost loading information back into our mental cache, checking where we left off, fighting the frustration of the interruption.
And we fall into the pathology of thrashing.
Thrashing occurs when the overhead the time spent switching and reloading context outweighs the time spent on useful work. If you're interrupted more than a few times an hour, your mental cache is constantly being invalidated by competing tasks. You spend more time bookkeeping than doing. You are algorithmically failing.
So the solution is to simulate a single machine system, like the legendary programmer Donald Knuth does.
Knuth famously avoids email. He's communicated only via post since 1990, and he reviews his mail every 3 months.
Every 3 months.
He practices batch processing. He deliberately creates long, uninterruptible blocks of concentration. He accepts a delay cost, not replying for 3 months, to dramatically minimize the context switching overhead, the meta work, and he achieves massive gains in deep throughput. It's an extreme but mathematically sound way to optimize.
I wonder how much more writing I could get done if I only checked my correspondence quarterly.
We all wonder that.
So we've established that complex problems require robust algorithms. But there is a crucial algorithmic boundary where trying too hard or thinking too much actually becomes detrimental.
Yes, this is the case against overthinking, and it's driven by the concept of overfitting.
Overfitting.
Overfitting is a critical concept in machine learning. It happens when you create a model that is so complex and detailed that it perfectly fits your existing training data.
So it explains what's already happened perfectly.
Perfectly, including all the random noise, the errors, the irrelevant variation. But then it fails miserably when you try to use it to generalize and predict new, unseen data. It's too bespoke, too rigid.
The ultimate analog example of this comes from history, Charles Darwin's decision to marry.
Right.
He used Benjamin Franklin's moral algebra, listing pros and cons for days, trying to optimize his life outcome.
He was trying to build the most complex, perfectly fitted model of his future happiness. On the cons list, alongside serious considerations, he listed minor extraneous factors.
Like having less money for books.
Exactly. And the burden of visiting relatives. His final conclusion, marry, marry, marry QED, was likely resolved by the first few factors. Children, companionship, guaranteed domestic comfort.
So the later factors, the book budget, that was essentially noise. It just increases anxiety and wasted time without improving the quality of the solution.
He was overfitting his decision model to irrelevant details. Thinking more led to a worse decision process, even if the outcome was okay.
So how do algorithms solve this problem?
By punishing complexity.
We need techniques to remove the noise.
Machine learning uses cross-validation. You hold back some of your data test points to see how well the model generalizes from the training data. If the model is perfect on the training data but terrible on the test data, you know it's overfitted.
Okay, and there's another technique, the lasso algorithm.
The lasso algorithm is fascinating. It introduces a penalty term that punishes the total magnitude of the factor's weights. This penalty forces the least important factors, like Darwin's book budget, down to 0.
It just eliminates them.
It transforms a complex, potentially overfitted 9-factor formula into a simpler, more robust formula based on only the 2 or 3 critical factors. We even see this in human communication. Complexity is punished by the labor of speaking at length, which is why we rely on concise, simple proverbs for generalized wisdom.
The most famous real-world application of this preference for simplicity comes from the man who invented the complex solution himself.
Nobel laureate Harry Markowitz, the father of modern portfolio theory. He developed the optimal complex allocation scheme for maximizing returns at a given risk level.
And how did he invest his own retirement savings?
He ignored his own mathematically optimal formula completely.
What?
He chose a simple heuristic, split his contributions 50-50 between bonds and equities, and when asked why, he admitted he chose to minimize my future regret.
Why was ignoring the optimal formula the rational choice for him, of all people?
Because Markowitz understood that applying his complex optimal allocation scheme requires highly accurate estimates of market statistics, correlations, volatility, expected returns. And if those input estimates are even slightly wrong and financial data is notoriously noisy and unreliable, the model becomes dangerously overfitted to the errors in the data.
The complex model, designed for perfection, became brittle.
Precisely. The simple 50-50 split, by contrast, is completely unaffected by market data errors. It's robust, simple, and it minimizes the risk of a catastrophic loss due to overfitting to untrustworthy information. It was the highly rational solution in a world of high uncertainty.
So what's the algorithmic rule for when we should just stop thinking?
The concept of early stopping is key. The greater the uncertainty or the larger the gap between what you can measure, like book budgets, and what truly matters, like companionship, the earlier you should stop thinking and default to a simple heuristic.
We've covered problems where we try too hard. Now, what about problems that are truly intractable? So computationally complex that finding the perfect, guaranteed optimal solution is essentially unreachable, even with enormous computing power.
Right. The traveling salesman problem is the academic example. Wedding seating arrangements are the painful human example.
Oh, wedding seating.
It perfectly illustrates the scale of intractability. One programmer, Megan Bellows, tried to optimize her 150-guest seating chart. She defined relationship strengths numerically and ran a computer cluster for 36 hours.
The program could only evaluate a minuscule fraction of the estimated 10 to the power of 107 possible seating configurations. That number is bigger than the number of atoms in the universe. The optimal solution is just unreachable.
So if you can't solve the hard problem, what's the computational strategy?
You use constraint relaxation. You solve an easier version of the problem.
How?
For the traveling salesman, you relax the constraints. You allow the salesman to retrace his steps for free. This gives you what's called the minimum spanning tree, or MST, and the MST provides a useful lower bound. We know the salesman's optimal route can't be any shorter than the MST. This benchmark lets us measure how close our approximation is to the ideal.
That's a beautiful metaphor for life advice. What would you do if you could not fail?
Yes.
It strips away the constraints, the financial, social, or skill limitations, to reveal the underlying relaxed ideal.
It reveals the desire, which then informs the direction you should take in the real constrained world. There's another powerful relaxation technique called Lagrangian relaxation. That sounds like pure math. Can we ground this for the listener?
Think of it like a diet where the constraint is never eat sugar or else. That's an impossible constraint, right? It leads to the intractable problem of maintaining perfect adherence.
Right.
Lagrangian relaxation asks, or else what? It takes that impossible constraint and bakes it into the scorekeeping system as a penalty. It downgrades the impossible to the merely costly. If I eat sugar, I have to run an extra mile tomorrow.
So you turn a binary failure state into a variable cost.
Exactly. And Michael Trick, the sports scheduler we mentioned earlier, uses Lagrangian relaxation to tackle the immense complexity of NCAA and MLB schedules. He faces constraints like Team X cannot play a home game on date Y.
Or must not have more than 10 consecutive road games.
Right. And instead of spending eons searching for the mathematically perfect schedule that satisfies every single constraint, he converts the constraints into financial or logistical penalties.
So he turns the inconceivable into the undesirable.
Exactly. And that lets him find a schedule that is close enough to satisfy the leagues, the television networks, and the schools, rather than holding out for a perfect optimum that might not be found before the season starts.
It's the wisdom of knowing that good is often better than waiting for perfect.
It really is.
We focus mostly on individual optimization. Now, let's move to how these algorithmic principles govern interactions with others, especially when we're coordinating or competing for shared resources.
Right, networking protocols. The rules that govern the internet are perfect models for how we should handle failure and congestion in human interactions.
Okay, so take the problem of collision, which was faced by early networks like the LONet.
If two signals were sent at the same time, they would collide and interfere. And if both stations just tried to retransmit immediately, they'd collide again, locking the network into perpetual interference.
Which is the human equivalent of two people trying to talk over each other, then both try to apologize at the same time.
And you get that infinite loop of awkward deference. The elegant solution is exponential backoff. After a failure, the station waits for a random period before retrying. If it fails again, it doubles the potential delay time. The sequence of delays, 2 seconds, 4 seconds, 8, 16, allows the network to accommodate any number of competing signal.
The system never gives up.
But the retry rate approaches 0, ensuring that eventually the transmission will be successful.
That's a fantastic metaphor for managing an unreliable friend. We can call it the algorithm of forgiveness.
I like that.
You don't have to completely cut them off, but you apply exponential backoff.
You do. If they cancel the first appointment, you reschedule in 1 week. If they cancel the second, you schedule the third in 2 weeks, then 4, then 8. Your rate of offering invitations asymptotically approaches 0, but you never have to deem them beyond redemption. You're just algorithmically managing the risk of collision.
A different principle governs stability. Additive increase, multiplicative decrease, or AMD.
AMD is the congestion control principle of TCP/IP, which is the engine of the internet. It governs how quickly a computer should send data.
How does it work?
The rate of transmission should increase slowly and steadily. That's the additive increase. But as soon as failure occurs, a dropped packet, which signals congestion, the speed must drop drastically, usually by half. That's the multiplicative decrease.
And this prevents the entire network from entering a congested, unstable state.
It does, and that model offers a serious critique of human organizations, especially regarding the Peter Principle, the idea that people get promoted until they reach their level of incompetence.
So the idea is that eventually every role is filled by someone doing the job badly because we only reward proficiency with promotion.
Right. AMD suggests that in human organizations, the optimal strategy requires a dynamic sawtooth career path. Competence is gained slowly, additive increase, but professional failure or incompetence at a new level must trigger a multiplicative decrease, a dramatic reduction in responsibility, maybe a sabbatical, or a shift to a different role.
We tend to avoid that multiplicative decrease in careers because it feels punitive. Demotion is seen as total failure.
But AMD shows it's necessary for systemic stability. If we constantly let people operate at the ceiling of their incompetence, the entire organization enters a state of thrashing or congestion. A healthy system requires that we prevent every critical spot from being filled by someone doing the job badly.
Finally, we have to discuss Jim Geddes' 2010 discovery of buffer bloat. This is a critical lesson in efficiency versus capacity.
Geddes discovered that massive latency slowness was being caused not by a lack of capacity, but by too much memory. Memory got cheap, so modem manufacturers installed huge buffers, thousands of times too large.
How does that cause delay?
If you start uploading a large file, the modem quickly fills its massive queue, the buffer, with packets. Now, if you simultaneously try to load a simple web page, the crucial ACK packet.
I got the data, send more packets.
Exactly. Those get stuck at the back of the enormous queue behind your upload. That delayed ACK causes the server to throttle the entire connection because it assumes the network is congested, slowing everything to a crawl.
It's the human analogy of a conversation where your is delayed by 10 or 20 seconds.
Mm-hmm. The speaker assumes you're not listening or comprehending and slows down their own delivery.
And the fundamental lesson is critical.
Bandwidth, or capacity, like a Boeing 747 carrying more passengers, is often confused with speed or low delay like a Concorde. A buffer that is permanently full, like a perpetually maxed out email inbox, or a schedule where you are never ever bored, provides the worst of both worlds.
All the delay and none of the efficiency.
Buffers only work correctly when they are routinely zeroed out.
Okay, shifting from technical coordination to anticipating competition. Game theory. We have to start with John Nash's discovery that every two-player game has at least one stable Nash equilibrium.
Right, a state where neither player would unilaterally want to change their strategy.
The genius of Nash was proving that stability exists.
But the practical problem is that finding the equilibrium in complex, real-world games is often intractable. It's what's called an NP-hard problem. If your laptop cannot find the optimal equilibrium in a complex market simulation, neither can the market itself. This puts a mathematical ceiling on how rational markets can truly be.
We see the gap between the optimal collective outcome and the rational individual choice most clearly in the prisoner's dilemma.
Where the individually rational strategy, defection, leads to an outcome that is worse for both players.
And this gap is measured by the price of anarchy.
The price of anarchy is the measure of inefficiency introduced by selfish behavior.
Isn't that inefficiency just the cost of free will? How is the price of anarchy calculated, and why should we care about paying it?
It's calculated by comparing the outcome of the Nash equilibrium, the selfish result, against the optimal cooperative solution, the centralized plan result.
Yeah.
And we should care because sometimes that price is staggeringly high.
Like with the unlimited vacation policy.
The unlimited vacation policy common in the Bay Area is doomed to a high price of anarchy.
It seems like a great cooperative offer, but why does it result in the zero vacation equilibrium?
It becomes a tragedy of the commons driven by competition. Employees compete to be perceived as more dedicated and loyal by taking slightly less time off than their peers.
So because there's no floor or ceiling?
The rational strategy for each individual is to defect from the cooperative ideal-taking vacation to gain a marginal advantage in loyalty perception. The stable equilibrium becomes zero vacation days, a situation where everyone is worse off, but no one dares to unilaterally change their strategy.
This is where mechanism design comes in, changing the rules of the game to shift the equilibrium toward a better outcome.
The classic metaphor is the Godfather. By changing the consequence of defection, sleeping with the fishes, the Godfather makes the cost of betrayal so catastrophically high that cooperation becomes the new, better equilibrium for the prisoners. You change the rule set to achieve computational kindness for the group.
And we see corporations act as the dawn in mechanism design too.
They do. The stock market shuts down at 4:00 p.m. It is a mandatory ceasefire. Without that enforced rule, the market would inevitably drift toward a sleepless, cutthroat Nash equilibrium, where traders would be forced to work 247 just to maintain parity, leading to collapse.
So shutting down the market is an act of mechanism design.
It transforms the game from a war into a sport.
Finally, we have to discuss information cascades, where groups of rational agents relying on public information fall prey to massive errors.
This happens when people discount their own private knowledge and rely too heavily on the observed actions of others. The external public signal becomes overwhelming, even if it's based on thin information or just an error. This leads to irrational herd behavior.
The famous and bizarre example is the developmental biology textbook, The Making of a Fly.
That book, which had a standard price, eventually reached a price tag of over $23 million on Amazon.
$23 million.
Because two competing sellers used algorithms that set their price relative to the other. Seller A set their price 1.27 times higher than Seller B. Seller B set theirs 0.998 times lower than Seller A. They spiraled into a computational feedback loop. Neither algorithm had any private information about the book's true value. They were only exploiting the public action of the other.
So what's the takeaway for the listener?
Be profoundly wary when public information, what others are doing, exceeds your private information, which is why they are doing it. And remember that observed actions are not beliefs. Others may be suppressing their own private doubts because of your implied confidence. If you find yourself mostly looking to others to set a course, they are likely looking right back at you, and you are both creating a runaway cascade of misinformation.
This deep dive has shown that algorithmic thinking isn't about becoming cold or robotic. It's about optimizing happiness and efficiency by making intelligent choices about how we manage our finite resources in the face of uncertainty. And throughout this, we keep coming back to this idea of computational kindness.
Computational kindness is the ethical design principle for human interaction and systems. We have to structure the computational problems we hand to others. For example, when asking for an appointment, being specific, next Tuesday between 1 and 2 p.m., is computationally kinder than asking for a convenient time.
Because checking one specific slot verification is vastly less computationally complex than forcing the other person to calculate their optimal available time slot from scratch. That's a search problem.
It also applies to physical design, bringing it back to parking. Contrast a complex stadium lot that forces people into difficult optimal stopping and game theory decisions with a simple linear ramp garage. In the Helix garage, the algorithm is simple. Take the first available spot. The computational load on the driver is zero. The goal of the designer should be to simplify the decision-making process for the user.
So the great synthesis of all these algorithms, optimal stopping, caching, scheduling, is that the most effective solutions for hard problems embrace simplicity, trade off error costs against delay costs, and rationally take chances. This perspective shows that much of what we deem irrational human behavior, from embracing a messy pile to trusting a gut instinct after a brief search, is actually backed up by mathematical proofs as the optimal way to manage finite time and crippling uncertainty.
It's deeply comforting to realize that your internal wiring is far more sophisticated than you ever gave it credit for.
Absolutely. And let's leave you with this final provocative thought, tied to the concepts of exploration, exploitation, and prediction. Our mind is constantly trying to predict the future, using something called Bayes' rule by updating our internal models based on new data.
And our sources suggest that humans absorb surprisingly accurate priors, these internal models about lifespans, the probability of certain events, the stability of political systems, just by living and accumulating subtle environmental data.
So, given that our willingness to explore, to take risks, and to commit to long-term projects depends entirely on this rich internal model of the future, our projected interval.
What information are you absorbing today through your news consumption, your social circles, and your experiences that your 80-year-old self will use to make the final pivotal decisions? The data you intake now is the prior that defines your future risk tolerance.